Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to be here back home in Limerick this morning. As Sarah mentioned, I worked here for over 6 years, just across, well, not across the river, but downriver in the Hunt Museum. And it would be remiss of me not to encourage all of you to go to visit the Hunt Museum while you're here, to take the opportunity to see that interesting, eclectic collection of antiquities and fine and decorative arts which were collected by John and Gertrude Hunt over the period of their lives as dealers. Um, they were a couple who initially based themselves in the UK. Gertrude was German, John was an Englishman with a deep interest in archaeology. Gertrude had an interest in fine arts, and they relocated to Ireland just before the war in 1939 and stayed in Ireland from then, but were working internationally. And their own personal collection is a very good mirror of their personal tastes and interests, and a snapshot of, I think, a world of collectors and dealers in the middle of the 20th century. It has had its moments, as some of you may know, whereby when I was director in 2004, the Simon Wiesenthal Centre made allegations about the provenance of the collection, and that resulted in a major research project which required that I and my colleagues at the museum and others did a lot of work in our libraries and archives looking at the ownership history of that collection. And I should say that the allegations which were made about the collection were proven to be unfounded. So I have a very strong personal connection with Limerick and a deep appreciation and fondness for the place, because I think it is a place, it's not our major capital city. It's been a city for many, many centuries, and if you get a chance to explore Limerick, even this part of Limerick, you're just outside the walls of Limerick. It was a medieval wall town, and you will see the fantastic fortifications of King John's Castle on the Shannon if you go west down the river. But it has, for as Jane said, there has been the practice of teaching art here for over 100 years, and indeed there is the practice of supporting creative people in this place. As I said, it's a third city, and sometimes third cities are on the back foot. And this is a third city which, for a number of decades at the start of this century, suffered significantly from deprivation and neglect, I should say, from government. And sometimes that creates an energy in a place, particularly amongst young people. And that energy and that spirit is evident throughout this campus in particular. Um, the spirit and the drive which fuels the student shows, which I was always pleased to attend, and indeed we sponsored one of the painting prizes for many years, the Hunt Museum, here in Limerick, because the calibre of students who come through this college are truly excellent, and many of them have led very successful careers in creativity. People like Amanda Coogan, a performance artist, or John Shinners, a painter whose work you see in the foyer. These people have come through these doors, as have indeed many of the fashion designers and significant designers who operate internationally. I was actually looking at the work of a very recent student, Anya Murray, I don't know if James is here, really interesting young woman who's working in wool. And their forms of expression are always broad, they're always challenging, and they're great fun, the students here. They occupy the city centre, and that's a really good thing about the location of this campus, because this campus itself is not without its own history and resonances. There has been teaching on this site since about 1802, when it was founded as a small private school for the poor of the city, a Lancaster school, then bought by the Christian Brothers, operated as a school for about 60 years, and then bought by the Good Shepherd sisters, which many people will know, many Irish people in the audience, and perhaps others, operated a system of what we call Magdalen laundries, which were basically places of incarceration, really, for young women who may have been pregnant or may have just found themselves in difficult times. And they worked here in these most horrific conditions in laundries. And that past is only now really being unpeeled in recent years. And to see the reuse and the readaptation of this space into a vibrant place of creativity is a great joy, because it is refinding a function, sitting on a history that has been very difficult and troubled for a portion of our population for many generations in the 20th century. So seeing the openness now when you come through the gates is a significant shift and change to its purpose for many years, and indeed the associations of the public with the place into a lively, vibrant place of creation, of making, and of freedom, which is the antithesis of what it represented in the past. And I should say as well, as it relates to the subject of today's conference, it's wonderful to see the strengthening of the Limerick School of Art into the Technological University of the Shannon, and the growth of the practice here, of the creative practice, and the development of research in this institution. And I know that there are a number now of registered masters and PhD students here, and their ability to pursue research and engage in large-scale research projects, which James referenced in his introductory remarks, are really hinged on the work that you all do as those custodians of those key resources that fuel scholarship, understanding, interpretation, objectivity, excellence. And that's something which can never be taken for granted or indeed dismissed. I usually, when I talk, I usually either have a short film, because we have a great head of communications who has been on holidays for the past few weeks, which is maybe one of the reasons why I don't have a short film today, because he's my main man. But I thought it was apt that my prop today would actually be a book, as I'm speaking to people who, while probably are managers in information science rather than maybe always in the written word, but the perception of those who work with main sources in libraries is that you work with books. I must come clean and say that I'm a qualified archivist, and I know there's one or two in the room. I don't know whether we're the outliers or not. Sometimes we are the black swans amongst all the graceful white swans, but we're always pleased to be part of the flock one way or another, no matter what colour we are. But being an archivist, I am acutely aware of how central the work of those who have the responsibility for caring for those records and indeed materials which are supportive of the understanding and the interpretation of collections in particular. And as I mentioned, Limerick is a vibrant city, and Limerick has a number of institutions which are collections based. There's the work here in teaching in the art school. There's, the Hunt Museum that I mentioned, but there's a very fine municipal collection here, the Limerick City Gallery of Art, which was one of the first municipal collections established in the 1940s. And one of the leading lights establishing the Limerick City Gallery of Art was the leading Irish painter Sean Keating, who was actually born down the road here in Bank Place, just about 2 blocks down the road. And Sean Keating, a very cantankerous man whom I knew in later life, he was just so negative about contemporary art or modern forms of expression. But he himself, in his youth, was very representative of a new Ireland and a new form of artistic expression, which had that boldness and that sense of advocacy that James spoke about. to look at a new state emerging into that bold new world just immediately after the First World War. And one of the major projects that was developed by the Irish state, and the most successful projects developed by the Irish state, was the building of a major hydroelectric dam on the River Shannon, about 7 miles upriver from where we are today, called Ardnacrusha. And Keating was commissioned by Siemens, the large firm who got the contract to build that dam, to record the construction of the building of the Ardnacrusha Dam. And that collection, which is mainly owned by the ESB, the electricity supply company here in Ireland, that collection of paintings, the style is that really photorealist style of painting, the heavy use of paint, but also the allegory and the symbolism, which represented that strength of the new, of the post-revolutionary Ireland, those men who had fought at times in ditches in the Irish countryside, who are now transforming themselves into the engineers and the creators of the new state. And indeed, some of the models that Keating used in his paintings for Ardnacrusha were models that he used for his Republican paintings. Some of the Irish people in the audience may know that big painting in the Crawford Gallery, Men of the South. Some of those models were used for the workmen in Ardnacrusha. And if you get a chance to visit the Hunt Museum, you will see one of Keating's major paintings, Night's Candles Are Burnt Out, which very much represents, even in its title, that fading past of an Ireland that was gone and the evolution into the brightness of the new Ireland of that new day when the candles of the past are extinguished. And you will see the allegory of the new greed in Ireland, the commerce, as opposed to the idealism of the revolutionary in the figures in that wonderful painting that's on display in the Hunt. But coming back to Limerick and the beginning of the Limerick City of Art collection, all the major painters in Ireland donated works to that collection. So it is a very fine representation of Irish art from the late 19th right to 19th century to today, and very well managed by Limerick City Council. But I think the gap in the management of municipal collections and collections outside the care of the state, such as the National Gallery, has been the supporting elements of ensuring that the interpretation of those collections and the additional materials that sometimes relate to a collection, that they are not properly collected, or there isn't in Ireland a cohesive network of repositories for the collection of materials of creative practitioners, the artists, the designers, architects, and others, many of whom through my professional career I've come across through curating collections, who will say to me, where can we deposit our collections? They may not want to. They may be from somewhere like Limerick or Cork or Kilkenny, where I work, and they may wish to have their collections close to their own place of origin. And it's very sad for me to say that the Irish state, for all its attention to its supposed support of the past, that what that looks like on the ground is actually very meagre. The number of local authority museums we have in Ireland, you can count on one hand. There are 7. There are 31 local authorities. Now, fortunately, there are 31 libraries because the Carnegie Library System was established in Ireland before the development of the state. But there are 7 to 8 local authority museums. There are very few in Leinster. When I'm talking to ministers, I say to them, does it mean that there's no cultural heritage or no archaeology in the centre of Ireland? Is that why there's no network to support the protection of that heritage? And equally, it is the case that the collection of, as I said, our significant creative practitioners with the exception of the excellent work done in the National College of Art and Design through their library and the work done in the National Gallery. A strategic focus on the collection of the work of these practitioners, both those such as Keating, who are now dead, but those current practitioners and those who are graduating from this very fine college. That is not really considered in any national cultural strategy. It is not considered important. And that's something I think that we as a group, both state agencies like the Heritage Council, and I'm standing here without explaining what I do or what we're about. We are a state agency, and our role is to provide advice to government, and also we operate a large number of grant schemes which support the care of heritage across Ireland. But our role is to ensure that we continue to be the voice for the protection of that heritage, and indeed that includes all of the bodies here included in this room who are working not only in Ireland but across the globe, because this is an issue I think that is not exclusive to this place. It happens, I see it, I've done quite a bit of work in America, particularly in Boston, in recent years, and I see the struggles that organisations have there to ensure that the large collecting institutions, that they have the resources, the parallel resources to care for the materials and the ancillary works that supplement and complement and enhance and provide that all-important context which really gives meaning to works. I also feel as well, when I talk to policymakers about this, that the current focus on technology means that the understanding of the role of professional librarianship, professional curatorship, professional stewardship, professional archival practice is not fully understood. Because sometimes you get this very flippant response, we can digitize everything and the job is done. And the absence of understanding of the requirement to establish a proper digitization program and the professionalism that is required to ensure that the outcome of the digitization process is something that is of quality and is of excellence and something that will stand up is very often, sadly, missing. And I think we have an important role to play and ensuring that there is an understanding that digital technology is a brilliant, powerful tool which we must use, we must embrace, but it is simply a tool that is embedded in a broader sweep of professional practice, of understanding how users will wish to use the final outcome and how professional inputs are important to ensure that the integrity of work is protected and that the objectivity that is required for research of standing and excellence can be achieved without the interference of ill-informed practice using digital technologies. And I've seen it all the time. I also feel in the teaching of art in art schools, and I was with friends last night who actually teach here, sometimes today with people, and my own children are evidence of this, they're born digital natives. They are immediately drawn to the use of digital technology and its power, which is really good and really important. But as we know, digital technology is constructed so that you will land upon a finite answer fairly quickly. That unfortunately means that the overall context can sometimes be lost, that the focus of drilling into databases whereby you're getting an immediate answer results in the absence of any clear understanding of the bigger picture. So if you take up a book and flick through the book, you get a greater sense of that scope and that big picture. Whereas if you are scanning through a database, that's not possible. And that is a loss, and students lose out in that regard. Speaking of technology, that is my own handbag now, that's a item. So I ask your forgiveness. As I said, when I was thinking about what I was going to say to you today, I realized that, I'm probably not the best person in that I have been very far removed for some time around the practice of the care and the stewardship of the resources that you have in your hands day in, day out. But I've never lost my interest or my appetite for for the wider art history that is my background. And over the weekend, I started reading a book entitled The Fabulous Frances Farquharson, which is about a woman who lived in Scotland, an American woman born in 1902 in Seattle and died in her 90s. And she, throughout her life, was editor of Harper's Bazaar and indeed worked for Vogue. But in the first chapter of the book, it reads, on the outskirts of Aberdeen, in a purpose-built modern construction, is the archive of the Aberdeen Art Gallery and Museum, a temperature-controlled storage space with rows that unfold like butterflies to reveal countless treasures. Within this vast collection is the extensive, perfectly preserved wardrobe of Frances Farquharson. So I think that introductory words, those sentences, very much encapsulate the dreams of art historians like me, who actually never really lose their passion for their interest in the history of design, but also as well confirms the importance of the repository and repositories which are built to standards of care, which are fully equipped, which are well resourced, and which are aligned with the purpose of the institution to which they are connected. And I know, because I actually know the collection in Aberdeen a little bit, I've done research there over the years, and I know that's a pretty new facility. And for many years, the gallery was closed in Aberdeen while the new gallery was being built. But it is a great pleasure to see that investment by the state in the collections for the citizens of the state. And then indeed to see in parallel with that the investment in the facilities for the research unit, which is outside Aberdeen, kind of in an industrial area, and then to see the results of that investment realised in this book. And that is something which I think is that we all aim towards and we aspire towards. I think today and this conference, they're really important events for people, as James said, and indeed Brett said earlier too, for people to get to know one another, to understand the common problems, and indeed to understand all the opportunities that we have. And those opportunities are realised through discussion, through advocacy, and through sharing each other's stories. So I hope that the next 3 days in Limerick are going to be really enjoyable. I hope you get a chance to go out and visit the City Gallery and the Hunt and maybe get out to UL. I know Andrea was telling me there's a very fine exhibition there of the photographies of Helen Hooker, very interesting American who spent time in Ireland, very fine collector as well. They have some of her collection out at UL. And indeed to enjoy this really interesting town, which is pretty vibrant and really creative. So, Gurb Míle Maithagibh, thank you for your attention and have a very productive couple of days. Thank you.